Captain James Walker stood at the observation deck of the human vessel Unity, gazing at the massive space station that loomed ahead. Nexus 1 was unlike anything humans had built, a sprawling structure of gleaming metal and pulsing energy fields that housed representatives from over 50 alien civilizations. As Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community, Walker felt the weight of 7 billion lives on his shoulders. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago, and compared to most species at Nexus 1, they were infants playing in a universe of ancient beings. "Captain, we're receiving docking instructions," his communications officer reported. "They've assigned us to the Outer Ring, the section reserved for non-established species." Walker nodded, straightening his simple blue uniform. "As expected, we haven't earned our place at the table yet." The Unity's engines hummed as they approached the designated docking bay. Through the viewport, Walker could see the various alien ships, some organic-looking with flowing lines, others geometric and imposing. Each represented a civilization that had been traveling the stars when humans were still figuring out how to make fire. "Remember," Walker addressed his small crew, "we represent not just our governments but our species. We're not here to impress them with technology. We can't. We're here to show them humanity's true strength, our adaptability, our diplomacy, our willingness to learn." The docking clamps engaged with a gentle shudder. Walker took a deep breath and moved toward the airlock. This moment would be recorded in every human history book for generations to come. The station's artificial gravity felt slightly stronger than Earth's. As the airlock opened, Walker was met by a delegation of 3 aliens, each completely different from the others. The tallest had blue-gray skin stretched over a thin frame with 4 arms. Another was short and stocky with scales that shifted color with each movement. The third floated above the ground, its translucent body pulsing with internal lights. Ambassador Walker, the tall one, spoke through a translation device. "I am Station Director Merrick. Welcome to Nexus 1. Walker bowed slightly. "Thank you for receiving us. Earth is honored to join the galactic community." As they walked through the station's corridors, Walker absorbed everything. The architecture, the various species passing by, the subtle power dynamics at play. Some aliens openly stared at him. Others deliberately looked away. "Most species here have known each other for thousands of years," Director Merrick explained. "New arrivals are uncommon." They arrived at a vast chamber where representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered. Conversation stopped as Walker entered. He recognized the awkward silence of judgment. A large creature with armor-like skin approached. "So this is Earth's champion," it rumbled. "I am Admiral Krell of the Stellar Concordat. Your transmissions have reached our territory for decades. Your entertainment broadcasts are interesting." Walker smiled. "I hope our actual culture proves more substantial than our television shows." This earned a few laughs from the gathered aliens. The tension eased slightly. Over the next few hours, Walker met representative after representative. He didn't pretend to understand all their customs or technologies. Instead, he asked questions, listened carefully, and spoke honestly about humanity's strengths and weaknesses. "Your approach is unusual, Ambassador Walker," Admiral Krell noted later as they stood watching ships arrive and depart from a large viewing window. "Most new species try to appear more advanced than they are." Walker looked out at the stars. "Humans have learned that pretending to be something you're not rarely ends well. We're young, we make mistakes, but we learn quickly. We don't want protection or charity, just a fair chance to earn our place." Krell's eyes, all 4 of them, studied Walker carefully. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your species after all." As the station's artificial day cycle ended, Walker returned to his quarters. First contact had gone better than expected. The road ahead would be long, but humanity had taken its first real step into the vast galactic community. Walker didn't know it yet, but his straightforward approach had already earned him both respect and enemies. 3 months after humanity's arrival at Nexus 1, Captain Walker's honest diplomacy had begun to bear fruit. Several species had established trade agreements with Earth, and Walker had earned a reputation for fairness and integrity. Even those initially dismissive of humans now acknowledged their quick learning and adaptability. Walker stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, mingling with representatives during a celebration of the stellar Concordat's founding. The vast chamber glittered with light displays that mimicked the home constellations of each member species. Admiral Krell had personally invited Walker, a significant honor for a non-member. "Your people continue to surprise us," Krell said, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "Your medical researchers have already adapted several of our treatments for human physiology. Most species take decades to accomplish such feats." Walker smiled. "We've always been quick studies, and we're grateful for the knowledge shared with us." Across the room, Walker noticed a group of Void Empire delegates watching him. The Void Empire controlled nearly 30 star systems at the galaxy's edge, and their representatives rarely participated in social functions. Their angular bodies and dark exoskeletons gave them an intimidating presence. Unlike most species, they had shown little interest in diplomatic relations with Earth. "They're not used to being ignored," Krell whispered, following Walker's gaze. "The Void Empire typically demands attention from new species. We've extended the same diplomatic courtesies to them as everyone else," Walker replied. "If they choose not to engage, that's their decision." The celebration continued, with representatives sharing stories and cultural exchanges. Walker was mid-conversation with a representative from a gas giant species when the lights flickered. The momentary power fluctuation. Nothing unusual on a station housing so many different technologies. Then Walker felt it, a sharp burning sensation in his chest. He looked down to see a small crystalline projectile protruding from his uniform. The room fell silent as he staggered backward. "Medical emergency," Krell shouted, catching Walker as he fell. Security forces swarmed the room. Through blurring vision, Walker saw them surround a Void Empire representative who stood motionless, holding a small device. "The message is delivered," the assassin announced loudly. "Primitives should know their place." Walker gasped for breath as station medics rushed to his side. The crystalline projectile had released a compound toxic to human biology. His body temperature rose rapidly as the poison spread. "Tell Earth, don't overreact," Walker whispered to Krell. "One life isn't worth escalation." The station's advanced medical team worked desperately to neutralize the toxin, but they had limited experience with human physiology. Walker's vital signs deteriorated rapidly. Across every human communication channel, the assassination played in real time, broadcast by the assassin's device. 7 billion humans watched as their first ambassador died on an alien station, his final words a plea for peace. The Void Emperor appeared before the emergency session of the Galactic Council hours later. The actions of this individual do not represent the official position of the Void Empire, he stated with practiced regret. "The perpetrator was acting alone and will face our justice." Few believed him. Intelligence reports had already linked the assassin to the Emperor's inner circle. Representatives from 12 species offered condolences to Earth. Some privately advised the human delegation to accept the loss and proceed cautiously. The galactic community had witnessed similar intimidation tactics before. Smaller or newer species were expected to recognize the implicit threat and adjust their ambitions accordingly. Humanity must understand its position in the galactic hierarchy, the Void Emperor told his advisors after the session. This demonstration will ensure they remain properly cautious for generations. When the human delegation departed Nexus 1 with Walker's body, they left in silence. No threats, no accusations. Earth's communication channels went quiet. For weeks, then months, humanity made no response to any diplomatic outreach. The galactic community assumed humans had retreated in fear, focusing inward after their harsh introduction to interstellar politics. It was a natural response for a young species. They were wrong. 6 months of silence from Earth had confirmed what most galactic species expected. Humans had withdrawn to lick their wounds. The Void Empire's message had been received. Humanity would take decades, perhaps centuries, to recover from the psychological blow of their ambassador's murder. Admiral Krell stood in his private chambers aboard the stellar Concordat flagship, reviewing reports on minor border disputes. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission, unusual, as his schedule showed no appointments. Source. He asked his communication system. Earth. Admiral. Global broadcast on all frequencies. Krell's 4 eyes widened. Display. The screen activated to show a human female in a crisp military uniform. Her gray hair was cut short, her expression grave but composed. Greetings to all galactic citizens. I am Admiral Helen Wilson of Earth's United Defense Force. For those wondering about our silence, we needed time, not to grieve, though we did. Not to fear, which we don't. We needed time to prepare. The camera pulled back to reveal she stood on a massive bridge, dozens of officers working at stations behind her. Captain James Walker was my student, my colleague, and my friend. His final words were a plea for peace. We respected his wish. For exactly 6 months. That time has now expired. The view changed to show Earth from orbit. The planet's night side glowed with city lights, but something else became visible. A network of orbital platforms that hadn't been there before, forming a complete defensive grid around the planet. What you're seeing was built during our silence, but it's merely the visible part. The image expanded to show the solar system. One by one, locations throughout Earth's system lit up. Asteroid bases, moon installations, orbital shipyards, hundreds of them, previously hidden. We never lied about our technology, Admiral Wilson continued, but we did withhold information about our production capabilities. While Captain Walker spoke of peace, we continued building, as we have for 50 years. The image shifted again, showing massive ships emerging from hidden locations across the solar system. They moved with precision, forming organized battle groups. Humanity has always prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. The Void Empire mistook our peaceful intentions for weakness. Today, that misconception ends. Data streamed alongside the visuals, showing ship specifications that made several galactic military analysts gasp. The vessels incorporated technologies that humans had pretended not to fully understand. We have activated and deployed our contingency fleet. 500,000 dreadnoughts, fully armed and crewed. Each represents the combined industrial output of entire cities, built in secret over generations. We call this Operation Walker's Legacy. On Nexus 1, representatives gathered around screens, watching in stunned silence. The humans had hidden this capability completely. To our allies who showed kindness, we remember. To those who stood by in silence, we understand. To the Void Empire, Admiral Wilson's voice hardened. You took one life, one precious human life. Captain Walker believed that life was invaluable. We agree, and we are prepared to demonstrate exactly how much we value our people. The broadcast showed the massive fleet arranging itself into formation. At normal production rates, assembling such a force would take centuries. We do not seek to destroy, but to establish a new understanding. The Earth fleet is now en route to Void Empire territory. We expect their unconditional surrender within 7 days. Admiral Krell leaned forward, studying the human vessels more carefully. They were elegant in their simplicity, clearly designed by a species that had spent centuries fighting among themselves before reaching the stars. The Void Empire believed they taught humanity a lesson about power. Admiral Wilson concluded. They were correct. We learned. And now, we will teach. The transmission ended, leaving silence across 1,000 worlds. Within hours, 3 previously neutral species requested formal alliances with Earth. The calculation of power in the galaxy had shifted in a single broadcast. From the command bridge of the flagship Justice, Admiral Wilson watched as the massive human armada traveled through hyperspace. The fleet's size was unprecedented in galactic history. 500,000 dreadnoughts, each measuring over 2 kilometers in length, plus thousands of support vessels. No species had ever revealed such military might all at once. Fleet status report, Wilson ordered, her voice calm despite the gravity of their mission. All battle groups maintaining formation, Admiral, replied Commander Thomas, her executive officer. Estimated arrival at Void Empire border in 19 hours. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. Many had trained their entire lives for this moment, though few had believed it would actually come. Humanity had always hoped their secret fleet would remain exactly that. A secret, a contingency never to be deployed. New transmission from Nexus 1. Admiral, the communications officer announced. The Galactic Council requests immediate dialogue. Wilson nodded. On screen, the main display lit up with the faces of 12 different species, the leading powers of the galaxy. At the center sat Director Merrick, looking considerably more strained than during Captain Walker's welcome ceremony. Admiral Wilson, the Council formally requests that Earth reconsider its current course of action, Merrick stated. The scale of your response threatens galactic stability. Wilson's expression remained unchanged. Did the Council make similar requests to the Void Empire after they assassinated our ambassador? Uncomfortable silence followed. Several representatives glanced away from their cameras. The Council acknowledges our failure to pursue adequate justice in that matter, Admiral Krell spoke up. However, the force you've mobilized could destroy the entire Void civilization. Our target is their military capability, not their civilization, Wilson replied. Unlike the Void Empire, we do not target civilians. The display split to show a new face, the Void Emperor himself. His exoskeleton gleamed with ceremonial oils, but his posture showed tension. This is an outrageous overreaction to an isolated incident, the Emperor declared. The assassin acted alone and has been executed. The Empire will consider any incursion into our territory an act of war against all civilized species. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly. You broadcast my friend's murder to every human on Earth as a warning. Now we respond with our own message. She cut the transmission with a gesture. The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of equipment. Commander Thomas moved closer to Wilson's chair. They're afraid, he observed quietly. With good reason, Wilson replied, but not for why they think. They believe we want revenge. What we want is justice and lasting peace. Throughout the fleet, preparations continued. Each dreadnought carried enough firepower to level a continent, but also housed medical facilities, diplomatic quarters, and humanitarian supplies. The ships had been designed with multiple purposes in mind. War was only one of them. In engineering sections, technicians made final calibrations to weapons systems untested outside simulations. In mess halls, crews shared meals, knowing some would not return. In meditation chambers, chaplains of various Earth faiths offered comfort to those who sought it. Aboard the Justice, Admiral Wilson retired to her private quarters for a few hours of rest before arrival. On her desk sat a small hologram, Captain Walker giving his first address to the Galactic Council. She activated it, watching as the young diplomat spoke of humanity's hopes for peaceful cooperation. We didn't want this, James, she whispered to the image. But they need to understand what happens when they harm one of us. The Armada continued its advance, a steel tide flowing through hyperspace. Across the galaxy, species large and small watched and waited, some with fear, some with hope, all with the realization that humanity was not what they had appeared to be. The Void Empire scrambled to prepare defenses, calling in every ship, activating mothballed weapons platforms. But deep down they already knew they had mistaken humanity's restraint for weakness, their patience for fear. The human armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Void Empire territory, a wall of metal stretching across space. Void Empire monitoring stations detected the arrival and immediately triggered system-wide alarms. Defensive fleets scrambled, civilian ships flooded, and planetary shields activated across 17 worlds. Admiral Wilson stood on the bridge of the Justice, watching tactical displays as they filled with enemy positions. The Void Empire had assembled their entire military to meet the human threat. Nearly 30,000 warships arranged in defensive formations around key worlds and installations. They've concentrated their forces around civilian centers, Commander Thomas observed, using their own people as shields. Wilson's expression hardened. As expected, transmit Phase 1 orders to all battle groups throughout the human fleet, targeting computers locked onto specific coordinates. These weren't cities or population centers, but military installations carefully identified through months of intelligence analysis. Command centers, weapon platforms, shipyards, and defense grid nodes. All ships report ready. Admiral, the weapons officer announced. Wilson nodded. Commence operation. The first strike was precisely coordinated. 10,000 human vessels fired simultaneously, their advanced kinetic weapons accelerating to near-light speed. The Void Empire's early warning systems barely had time to register the attack before the projectiles struck their targets. Across 17 systems, military installations erupted in flames. Planetary defense shields flickered but held. The human weapons had been calibrated to penetrate defensive screens while minimizing collateral damage. First wave impact successful, reported the tactical officer. 87% of targeted facilities neutralized. On the main view screen, the Void Empire's defensive formation broke apart as commanders scrambled to respond to the unexpected precision of the attack. They had anticipated a frontal assault against their fleet or bombardment of major cities, the standard tactics of intimidation. Instead, the humans were systematically dismantling their military infrastructure while leaving civilian areas untouched. They're responding with a counterattack, Commander Thomas announced. 3 battle groups accelerating toward our position. Let them come, Wilson replied. Activate quantum shields. As the Void ships approached, they launched a barrage of energy weapons. The beams struck the human vessels and dissipated harmlessly against shimmering barriers of light. The quantum shielding technology, developed in secret on Earth, absorbed and redistributed the energy in ways the Void Empire's scientists had never conceived. Their weapons are ineffective. Admiral, the defensive systems officer reported. Shield strength at 97%. Wilson leaned forward. Deploy interceptors. Disable their propulsion systems but avoid destroying vessels where possible. Smaller craft launched from the human dreadnoughts, moving with impossible agility. The Void ships fired desperately, but the human interceptors evaded their targeting systems. Within minutes, the attacking force drifted powerless in space, their engines precision-targeted and disabled. On Nexus 1, representatives from dozens of worlds watched the battle unfold through long-range sensors. What they witnessed wasn't the genocidal rage many had feared, but something more frightening: absolute military superiority coupled with remarkable restraint. They could destroy their entire civilization, Admiral Krell murmured. Yet they're surgically removing only military capability. A representative from a peaceful aquatic species turned to him. Perhaps we misjudged these humans. Aboard the Justice, Wilson received an unexpected transmission. Admiral, we're being contacted by Admiral Thorne of the Stellar Concordat Fleet. On screen, Wilson ordered. Admiral Krell's second-in-command appeared. Admiral Wilson, the Concordat recognizes the precision of your operation. We wish to offer tactical information regarding hidden Void Empire military installations in the Helios sector. Wilson raised an eyebrow. Why would you assist us, Admiral Thorne? The Void Empire has committed atrocities against many species, Thorne replied. Your approach, neutralizing military capability while sparing civilians, aligns with Concordat principles. We should have taken similar action years ago. As the first day of operations ended, the Void Empire had lost 60% of its military infrastructure. Not a single civilian population center had been targeted. The human fleet advanced methodically through Void territory, system by system, following the same pattern: precision, restraint, and overwhelming force. Within 4 days, the human fleet had systematically dismantled 80% of the Void Empire's military capacity. Their approach never varied. Precision strikes against military targets, careful avoidance of civilian casualties, and disabled rather than destroyed enemy vessels where possible. The pattern confused Void military commanders, who had expected either negotiation or total war, not this methodical dismantling of their power. On the 5th day, Admiral Wilson directed the Justice toward the Void homeworld, Noctis Prime. The planet was surrounded by the remains of the Empire's once proud defense fleet, hundreds of vessels drifting powerless, their weapons and engines disabled by surgical strikes. "We're receiving a system-wide transmission from the Void Imperial Palace," reported the communications officer. "Display it," Wilson ordered. The Void Emperor appeared on screen, his exoskeleton no longer polished to a shine. His 4 limbs were held in a posture that cultural experts identified as extreme stress. "This senseless attack must end," the Emperor declared. "You have made your point. The Empire is prepared to offer reparations for the unfortunate incident with your ambassador." Wilson's expression remained calm. "The time for simple reparations has passed. We require your unconditional surrender and your presence aboard this vessel within 2 hours." "Impossible," the Emperor hissed. "The other galactic powers will not allow this overreach. I have already appealed to the Council for intervention." "They declined," Wilson replied simply. "Your surrender terms have been transmitted." 2 hours, Emperor." The transmission cut off. On the bridge, Commander Thomas approached Wilson's chair. "Intelligence reports the Emperor is attempting to evacuate to a hidden bunker on the moon of Noctis 3, he said quietly. Wilson nodded. "As expected. Team Epsilon is already in position." 90 minutes later, a small transport attempted to leave the Imperial Palace using stealth technology. It made it halfway to the moon before being intercepted by a human special operations team. The Emperor and his high command were escorted to the Justice without resistance. As the Emperor was brought to the bridge, he expected execution. Instead, he found representatives from 12 species waiting alongside Admiral Wilson, including Admiral Krell and delegates from worlds the Void Empire had victimized over centuries. "What is the meaning of this?" the Emperor demanded. "Justice," Wilson answered. "Not vengeance. You will stand trial for crimes against sentient beings under the laws agreed upon by all galactic species, including your own." "Trials." The Emperor's voice rose in disbelief. "For what purpose? We acted as any power would to maintain order." Admiral Krell stepped forward. "Evidence has been presented of 27 planetary genocides ordered by your regime, 342 species rendered extinct, thousands of worlds stripped of resources and left uninhabitable." The Emperor's posture shifted, all legal under the non-interference protocols. Major powers have always been permitted to manage their territories as they see fit. "Those days are over," Wilson stated firmly. "Humanity will not join a community where might makes right. The death of one human showed us that the current system is broken." The Void Emperor looked around at the assembled representatives. "And you all support this revolution?" "We do," confirmed a representative from a species that had lost 3 colony worlds to Void Empire expansion. "The humans have accomplished in days what the Council debated for centuries. They've created a moment of possibility." Over the next week, the human fleet maintained its position around Void Empire worlds, while a provisional government was established. Teams of legal experts from a dozen species began documenting war crimes and atrocities hidden for generations. In a historic session of the Galactic Council, Admiral Wilson proposed a new charter, one that established genuine consequences for aggression and guaranteed the rights of all sentient beings, regardless of technological development or military strength. "We built our fleet hoping never to use it," Wilson told the Assembly. "Now that we have, we propose a new purpose for it, and for all of us." 3 months after the fall of the Void Empire, Admiral Wilson stood in the newly constructed Memorial Hall on Nexus 1. At its center stood a lifelike statue of Captain James Walker, his expression thoughtful and kind. The inscription below simply read, "One life, immeasurable value." Representatives from over 200 species gathered for the unveiling ceremony. Many had traveled across the galaxy to witness this moment. The official ratification of the Walker Accords, a new framework for galactic governance. Wilson touched the base of the statue briefly before taking her position at the speaking platform. The hall fell silent. Captain Walker believed that peaceful cooperation was possible between all sentient beings, she began. He maintained that belief until his final breath. Today, we honor not just his memory, but his vision. The massive view screens surrounding the hall displayed images from across the galaxy. Human dreadnoughts, once symbols of war, were being modified for new purposes. Some became research vessels exploring uncharted regions. Others were converted to emergency response ships, capable of delivering aid to worlds facing natural disasters. Many remained vigilant, now bearing the insignia of the newly formed Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a multi-species initiative. 500,000 ships built for war, Wilson continued, now serve life instead of ending it, just as Captain Walker would have wanted. The Void Empire's former territories have been reorganized into autonomous regions, each with representation in the Galactic Council. The Emperor and his high command remained in custody, awaiting trials that would set precedents for centuries to come. Some called our response excessive, Wilson acknowledged. Perhaps it was, but consider the message we needed to send, that in this galaxy, the strong cannot prey upon the weak without consequence. That every sentient life, whether human or otherwise, deserves protection under common law. Admiral Krell stepped forward, joining Wilson at the platform. Together, they activated a holographic display showing the text of the Walker Accords. The document established clear mechanisms for dispute resolution, consequences for aggression, and protections for developing species. The Stellar Concordat fully endorses these accords, Krell announced. We recognize that humanity's actions, while initially shocking, have created an opportunity for lasting peace. Sometimes the greatest changes require the boldest actions. One by one, representatives rose to signal their world's ratification. Even former Void Empire worlds, now free from oppression, joined the growing consensus. Later that evening, Wilson stood at the observation deck of Nexus 1, watching ships come and go. Commander Thomas joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee, a beverage that had become surprisingly popular among several alien species. Quite a view, Thomas remarked, handing her a cup. It is, Wilson agreed. Different from what I imagined when we launched the fleet. Better or worse? She considered the question. Different. We prepared for centuries, built a force that could stand against any threat. Then we found a way to use that strength that didn't require destroying our enemies. Below them, in the station's main concourse, humans mingled freely with dozens of species. Earth had gone from an isolated newcomer to a central pillar of the galactic community in less than a year. The Void Emperor still claims we overreacted, Thomas said. That unleashing 500,000 dreadnoughts over one death was disproportionate. Wilson shook her head. He still doesn't understand. It was never about proportional response. It was about demonstrating that humanity values each life so deeply that we would reshape the galaxy to protect it. A small ship departed the station. A research vessel headed to explore a newly discovered star system. It bore the flags of 7 different worlds, including Earth. Captain Walker would be proud, Thomas said quietly. Wilson watched the ship until it disappeared into hyperspace. He would, and somewhat surprised, I think. He always believed diplomacy could solve any problem. It did, Thomas replied, just not the way he expected. Wilson smiled slightly. True enough. Sometimes the best diplomacy comes from having 500,000 very convincing arguments behind your words. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity came in peace, but they came prepared for war. And they valued life, every single one, more fiercely than anyone had anticipated.